Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So in today's video, I want to talk about all of the books that I've purchased in the second quarter of 2023. So I've decided that since I keep myself on the limit of how many books I can buy, it only makes sense for me to be doing these hauls quarterly rather than monthly or anything more than that. That way these videos can be fairly interesting and I actually have two pretty fair stacks of books here to talk about. So this might take a while, so let's just get started. So the first book I'm going to talk about is The Vanishing Half by Britt Bennett. So I am actually currently reading this. This is the one book out of this whole stack of books that I'm currently reading. I would say this is more of a mixed timeline literary fiction about two twin sisters who are struggling with their race and their racial identity and how they choose to live their lives and how it affects their daughters in the future. So I'm actually really enjoying this book. I'm almost done with it. So excited to see how it turns out. The next two books I'm going to talk about together are Every Heart a Doorway and the second book in the series, Down Among the Sticks and Bones. So these are the first two books in the Wayward Children's series by Shauna Maguire. I heard a lot about these books. I'm pretty sure they're fairly popular on BookTube. And I finally got started with it because I actually love Shauna Maguire. One of her previous books that she wrote under her other name, Mira Grant, it's called Into the Drowning Deep. I really enjoyed that book, so I already had a feeling that I really enjoy Shauna Maguire's writing style. And so far, I've really been enjoying this series. I'm now on the fourth book. I'll put it up here because I forgot what it's called. But I've really been enjoying this series. It's a fantasy magical realism series about a boarding school of children who all experience their own portal fantasies into these different worlds. And every other book tells a story of a different child and the world that they specifically visited. So I'm gonna work my way towards collecting the entire series, and hopefully the next time I do a haul, I'll have the rest of the books. Now, this next book is Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabriel Zevin. I have not read this book yet, but I've heard a lot of great things about it. I wasn't too sure if I'd enjoy it. I know it has something to do with these two friends or lovers who created a video game. I like video games being an element in stories, and I'm still trying to find a book that I enjoy as much as. Okay, so I have no idea why I'm forgetting every single book I've ever enjoyed. But the reason I purchased this book is because I'm still trying to find a story that I enjoy that involves video games. So hopefully, when I read this, it'll be a winner. The next book that I hauled that I also have not read is 7 Days in June by Tia Williams. Now, this book was raved about by Jamie from Jamie's Library. I think it tells the story about these two people who are authors who fell in love when they were teenagers and haven't spoken since, but continue to communicate through the novels that they write. Now, that sounds really romantic, and obviously, as somebody who enjoys books, the premise of two authors writing to each other just sounds so sweet and something that I feel like I'd really enjoy. I've been struggling to find a romance that I actually enjoy. So I've been very picky but also very decisive about what romance books I decide to pick up. So I'm hoping that this one will be something I enjoy. Now, the next book that I picked up but I haven't read yet is The Wheel of Time by Robert Jordan. So this is the first, the series is called The Wheel of Time. This is the first book, The Eye of the World. Now, I watch quite a few fantasy readers, and the main one that I've heard talk about this the most is Daniel Green. I want to see if classic fantasy or the more old school fantasy is something that I would enjoy. I also have The Lord of the Rings on my shelves as well, but I figured I would pick this up and try it out. I'm not sure when. I'm going to make sure that I'm really in the mood for a more traditional fantasy novel. I know this follows a group of teenagers or young adults whose village gets destroyed and they go on this adventure to save their world. And I know it has a very interesting magic system where men and women are capable of gaining magical powers, but they react to it differently. And something where when women gain it, they can become very powerful, but when men gain magical abilities, the more they use it, they lose their mind. So it sounds interesting. Will I enjoy it? I don't know, but I still got it just in case I do. Now, the next book that I'm going to talk about is another one I haven't read, and this is The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern. This is going to be the first book that I've ever tried to read by Erin Morgenstern. For me, I've heard mixed things about this one. People either really love it or really hate it, and I'm a bit nervous because I feel like people that really enjoyed this also tend to enjoy literary fiction, and I don't think I'm a fan of literary fiction, or at least I'm not a fan of literary fiction with very flowery descriptive writing and very vague themes. But it had an interesting premise. I want to see if I'll enjoy it. Basically, this is about a man who finds this hidden library. And in this library, he picks up a book that somehow has the story of his childhood or his life in that book. I'm not too sure what happens after that. I don't know if he goes on an adventure. Does he? I'm assuming he goes on an adventure, discover more about this library, or so on and so forth. I am going to definitely wait until it is the right time for me to be in the mood to give this book its best shot. Now, the next book I'm going to talk about is a book I've already read. This is The Alloy of Law by Brandon Sanderson. It's the first book in the Mistborn Era 2 series, and I have already finished Era 2, and so I've been slowly working on collecting the books after I've already realized that I enjoy Era 2. Not as much as Era 1, but I still enjoyed it well enough that I want to have the books on my shelves. Now, this is basically a fantasy novel set thousands of years after the first trilogy, the first Mistborn trilogy, and it's more of a fantasy western mix. But I really enjoyed the connections. I enjoyed the time jump from the first era, so I think if you are a fan of Brandon Sanderson's books, you'll probably enjoy that one. So I'm slowly working on increasing my shelf of Brandon Sanderson books. Now, this next book is House of Sky and Breath. This is the second book in the Crescent City series by Sarah J. Maas. I'm pretty sure most of you either have heard of this book, heard of this series, heard of this author for sure. I was surprised that I enjoyed House of Earth and Blood, the first book in the series. And so I definitely picked up the second one to see if I'll continue to enjoy it. I'm not a Throne of Glass fan, and I'm a minor Court of Thorns and Roses fan, but this is definitely my favorite series that Sarah J. Maas has wrote. And I am going to be continuing on with it. It follows a half fae, half human woman who lives in this urban fantasy city. It doesn't take place in the real world. It takes place in this mythical world, but has very modern technological advancements. So it's kind of like our world mixed with fantasy, where a bunch of fantasy creatures are walking around. I am so excited for the next book to come out later this year. Now, the next one is How to Sell a Haunted House by Grady Hendrix. Now, I read this book earlier this year and absolutely loved it. This is a horror novel that follows this brother and sister who are trying to sell their parents' house after their parents have passed away. In doing that, weird things start to happen in the house that make these siblings believe that the house is haunted. Now, I love the commentary in this. I love the themes. I enjoy following these characters who I found very relatable. Although these stories are typically scary, I still enjoyed the traditional horror tropes and elements that were involved. This next book I haven't read as well. It's The Push by Ashley Audrain. I can't remember what this book is about. I think this is about a woman who dreams of becoming a mother, but when she has her daughter, she doesn't have the relationship that she expected to have. I think there's something wrong with her daughter, who seems to act abnormally, and it slowly pushes the mother towards insanity. Now she's thinking, oh, maybe I'm just a horrible mother, but then when she has another child, she starts to realize that maybe she's not the problem, maybe her daughter is. So this has the creepy child trope, and I'm definitely excited to pick it up once I get back in the horror thriller mood. Now, the next two books I'm going to talk about together as well. Oh my gosh, they're heavy. This is book 1 and book 2 in the Saga graphic novel series. Now, this series is a little weird. When I finished book 1, I enjoyed it, and then the longer I had to sit with my thoughts about the series, the more I realize that it's very, very weird. It's basically about these two creatures who live on different planets in this galaxy that are at war, and they fall in love and end up having a child together. And so they must go on the run to escape prosecution for betraying their sides in the war. And they're just running across the galaxy, just trying to raise their little family and live their life in peace. This book has a lot of violence. It has a lot of graphic images, violence, gore, and a lot of sexual content that I sometimes find pointless. But I'm still fairly interested in the story and invested in these characters. So I decided to pick up the second bind up and continue on with this story. Let's put this at the bottom because it's the biggest. Okay, let's pause this for a second while I fix these books. All right, so the next book I also have not read, and this is The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Douglas Adams. Now, I've heard Murphy Napier rave about this book, or at least the first couple books in this series, and I wanted to see what all the hype is about. So I can't even give you a description, but I will let you know once I read it. This book I've already read. This is 19 Minutes by Jodi Picoult. Now, this is about a school shooting that happens in this small town, and it follows the point of view of many different people within this town and discusses how this horrific event can affect so many people and has such widespread effects on everybody involved in the situation. It discusses so many moral themes and has you looking at different points of views that you wouldn't even consider. This book I have not read. This is Six Crimson Cranes by Elizabeth Lim. Now, I heard about this book from many different authors, but the one that made me decide to get it was Books of Brittany. Okay, so this book follows this young girl who gets cursed along with her brothers. All her brothers are turned into cranes, and she is cursed where for every word that she speaks, one of her brothers will die. So it seems like a pretty dark story, and I'm interested to see like how it turns out. Now, this one is Piranesi by Susanna Clark. I've heard a lot about this from Elias on BookTube. I don't know what it's about either. I don't know why I keep buying books that I don't know anything about. Now, this next book I've already read. This is the final book in the Good Girl's Guide to Murder trilogy, and this is As Good as Dead by Holly Jackson. Now, I absolutely hated this book. I read it a couple months ago, I believe, and I absolutely despised it. I hated how this series ended. I didn't like anything about this book. If you don't know, A Good Girl's Guide to Murder follows this high school girl who decides to attempt to solve a cold case murder that happened in her small town for her senior class project. And then the following books follow the same girl in different situations. And I absolutely loved the first two books, 5 stars. And then this book was like a 2 star. Absolutely hated it, unfortunately. I've also read this one. So this is The Arithmetist by Brandon Sanderson. One of the few books that I've read from him that aren't within his Cosmere universe. The magic system involved in this world involves chalk. So this boy goes to this school where they are studying how to be arithmetists, and arithmetists are those that use chalk drawings that come to life to battle certain creatures. There's a mystery element in this book that I thoroughly enjoyed, mixed in with Brandon Sanderson's magic systems, intricate magic systems that I thoroughly enjoy. So I really enjoyed this book. Right now it's a standalone, but I've heard that he may be continuing on with this series, so I'm definitely looking forward to the sequel. Now, this next manga is this is a manga that I read. This is a continuation of the orange bind up mangas that I've read. They're like right over there somewhere. And if you've watched my previous vlogs, you know I absolutely hated this continuation. I felt like it was completely unnecessary. Now, the first two bind ups I absolutely love. Just this one. This is the only one that I hate. This next book is Verity by Colleen Hoover. Now, I've enjoyed a couple of Colleen Hoover's books, and this happens to be one of them. Actually, I guess it's more of a dark romance thriller with more emphasis on the thrilling parts of the story. This follows a woman who is hired by a man to continue the book series of his wife who is in a comatose state. This woman ends up moving into her and her husband's house, and strange things start to happen. And she discovers this book that seems to be an autobiography by this woman, and she starts to learn some disturbing things about this family. I really enjoyed the series. I know the twist at the end. People either love it or hate it. I happen to be a person that loved the ending for this, so that's probably why I enjoyed it while others have not. The next book is another thriller. So this is The One by John Mars. Premise is that genetic technology is being used to match people up in this dating app. Now, if you've read The Soulmate Equation by Christina Lauren, similar premise, but with a thriller lens. Now, I did not like The Soulmate Equation, and that's what got me to pick up The One, and I thoroughly enjoyed this one because I liked where this type of story explored that idea more of using genetic material or DNA to match people up, and how it can take a dark turn. Now, I highly recommend this one if that sounds interesting to you. This next book I have not read yet. This is Once Upon a Broken Heart by Stephanie Garber. Now, I read a few pages and decided to put it down because I wasn't feeling it at the time, but I still have high hopes that I'm going to enjoy this one. So this follows a girl who makes a deal with the Prince of Hearts in order to stop the wedding of her true love and her sister. Now, I think that has like disastrous consequences. I am looking forward to reading this when I'm in the mood for a romance. So Anxious People by Frederick Bachman. Frederick Bachman is kind of hit or miss for me. A majority of his books I do enjoy, some more than others, but this one I did like. It follows this group of people who are attending an open house for this apartment, and a bank robber interrupts this open house. The rest of the book kind of dives into the lives of all of these people, their struggles of life, and where they've been through or what they've been through, and how this bank robbing kind of affects them in different ways. Now, if you're going to get into Frederick Bachman's works, I definitely recommend Anxious People as one of them. Although I do know that he has a whole slew of books that a lot of people have enjoyed. This one just happens to be one of my favorites. Now, another book that I have hauled this quarter is The Cruel Prince by Holly Black. I did read this one. I'm still not too sure what I feel about it. Part of me really enjoyed it, and another part of me found it very boring. So I'm still on the fence about whether I want to continue on with this series. Then maybe I'll pick it up. But this basically follows these sisters who get kidnapped by this fae who takes them to this court ruled by fae where humans are treated like absolute crap, treated like slaves. This particular character that we follow is especially mistreated by the prince of this fae world. Now, it is supposedly a hate to love romance, and I definitely think there's a strong emphasis on hate. And personally, I don't know if hate to love is my particular brand of romance, so I think that's kind of the reason why I'm not too keen on continuing on with this series. But I'm still hanging on to this just in case one day I decide to. All right, these next few books I can talk about together. So I purchased the Shadow and Bone trilogy by Leigh Bardugo. I enjoyed this trilogy even before the series came out. I originally read the trilogy through the library, and I decided I wanted to have the books on my shelves. Now, in case you didn't know, these books follow Alina Starkov, who seems to be this regular girl who is a soldier in her country, and she's a map maker. And then this disastrous event happens where her best friend's life is put at risk, and it reveals her hidden superpower that involves light magic. And light magic is exactly what her country needs in order to survive. I don't really feel like talking more about it. If you haven't heard about it, there's a whole series on Netflix. So many people know about this series, and I just wanted to have these books on my shelves, my own copies. This next book is Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I have enjoyed almost every single book that Taylor Jenkins Reid has put out, and Daisy Jones and the Six happens to be one of the ones I didn't enjoy as much as the others. I definitely enjoy The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, Malibu Rising, and Carrie Soto's Back a lot more than Daisy Jones and the Six, but I still feel like this book is pretty iconic and still enjoyable in its own right. Like, I definitely enjoyed the way this book was written and the story. I just really hated the main character. So I feel like that really affected the rating that I gave this book, but when I think about it, I still enjoy the story and following these characters. So I can't just let the main character ruin a whole book for me. So I decided to pick it up, and maybe I might reread it at some point. Who knows? Maybe my rating will change. Oh my gosh, we've reached the end. This is the last book that I'm going to be talking about, Ninth House by Lee Bardugo. And as you can see, I've already started it. I started this last month, but I decided to put it down because it just wasn't the right time for me. This follows this college student who is given this deal. She can go to this Ivy League college as long as she is a spy who is working to supervise these occult hidden societies within this Ivy League college. Now, each of these powerful groups have dabble in the occult when it comes to like ghosts and supernatural things, like I think like telling the future and stuff. To be honest, I'm not 100% sure, but that was the vibe that I got when I first heard about this. I don't know if it's something I'm going to enjoy. I heard it's very dark. Maybe when the mood strikes for a dark fantasy, I'll probably pick this up again. But I'm definitely glad I have it on my shelves because obviously I enjoy Lee Bardugo's work. Wow. So this is it. These are all the books that I've hauled in the second quarter of this year from April, May, June, and July. I think these are all the books from those 4 months. These are all the books that I have read, and these are all the books that oh, wait, why did I put this up here? I've actually read this one too. Everything else, all of these I have read, these I haven't read. I'm trying to be better about only purchasing books that I either already read and really enjoyed, like 4 stars and above, or books that I feel like I will enjoy more physically reading them, and where I feel like physically reading them will increase the chances of me appreciating the story more. So that's why there are some books on here that I have not read, but I have purchased. And I'm really looking forward to reading these. Let me know, guys, especially for this top pile, are there any books that you really enjoyed and you think I should give a chance right away? And that's about it, guys. Thank you so much for watching this really long video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned about some great books that you could potentially read. And I hope to see you guys in the next one. Thank you guys so much for watching. Bye.